Hello Bonaparte listeners, it's Rebecca. I just wanted to tell you that we are now on Patreon with 6 different subscription tiers and lots of exciting treats and extras, including bonus mini episodes, monthly catch-ups, Ask Me Anythings and more. So listen to the podcast, follow us on Instagram, and please go to patreon.com/Bonaparte podcast to learn more. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Rebecca, it's Beatrice.
Hi, Beatrice. It's Rebecca. How are you?
I'm well, but I am quite glad that we inching towards the weekend.
Yes, I think that's very welcome.
Yeah, it's been a week.
It's been a week.
Yeah.
And now we want the weekend.
Yes. Yes. What about you?
Oh, well, I have a few things I want to tell you.
Okay.
Firstly, you know I'm always cold. That's one
Yes.
fact we know. Another thing is my favourite fairy story is The Princess and the Pea. Largely, it will make sense soon, I'm telling you this.
Okay.
Largely because I was obsessed when I was little with the illustrations where she's on like 25 mattresses and they're all slightly different patterns.
Yes.
And well, I'm trying to recreate that in my bedroom because you see, what I realized is I need to get single-sized things because Adrian's not always cold. So currently I have the duvet, which is covered in a very attractive kind of very pale bluey green French linen. Then I have another single duvet, which is covered in a grey and white graphic print. Then I have a really rather gorgeous pink and green checked blanket with fringes. Then I have a single thin quilt, which is deepest, darkest olive green with tiny white dots.
That sounds
amazing. So I'm trying to recreate Princess and the Pea, but on top of me.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Coda loves it.
Yeah, I want to have an outfit with all of this in it.
Well, maybe, when it's summer, we can cut it all up and make you an outfit from it.
Yeah.
But yes, this is making me very happy because I've finally reached a temperature that's acceptable to me. And as I say, Coda just thinks it's the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, and it's very nice because you get little flashes of the different patterns. So it's taking me back into World of Princess and the Pea. So it's just marvelous.
Yes, it sounds amazing.
So that's my triumph of the week.
Yeah.
Is having created this pile of things. And then the other thing I've been doing this week is researching for chapter 4.
Oh, you've got access now to the archive, don't you?
Oh, my giddy aunt. Oh, my giddy aunt. And I only have it for this month. So I'm trying to do what I needed to do anyway, and then also that on top. It's so important. This archive is so important and fascinating because, like, for example, I'm writing about this Harlem fashion show. Trying to find it in the mainstream white press, nothing. Really hard to find anything. In the black newspapers, you put in fashion show, 1920, 1939, and about 3,000 things come up. And amazing, amazing things on how 10,000 people were attending this one in Chicago, 5,000 in Baton Rouge. And it's like just everything, like what it's just showing exactly everything. Sorry, Coda is woofing to agree with me. It's showing everything we knew, but in a new graphic way of how we do not tell histories. And it's just amazing, but I may have to just stay up for the rest of the month because no one seems to have it in this country. But
really? Not the British Library?
I don't think so. Well, the librarian said, "Oh, Senate House doesn't have it," and I don't know. I should check at the British Library. But yeah, I'm just very thankful that I have it, and I have my list of keywords that I'm going to work my way through.
Wow!
So that's been very good. And then I've just been doing research on illustration and photography, which is really interesting.
Oh, that sounds like a good week, a busy week.
A busy week, but a good week.
Yeah.
And a warm week.
Yes.
How about you?
Well, I went to this event at Barbican about a filmmaker, and he's known as Sam the Wheels,
Wow.
but his real name is Clovis Constantine Salmon. But apparently no
Wow.
one calls him Clovis. He's just called Sam. He was there.
Oh, he was there.
He was
Wow.
there. So
How cool.
I'm sort of, what I'm reading is sort of slightly conflicting in terms of dates, but I guess it doesn't really matter. But somewhere it said he's 94. He's definitely over 90s, I think.
Wow.
And yeah, he was right next to me because I was sitting in the front row. So he is from Jamaica, and he went I think in 45, he went to the US, which he really, really did not like, to work. And then he came to England, I think, about 54. And then a few years later, I think he started to make films, and he didn't have any, training or anything like that. And I saw one video where he talks about he bought this camera and he just put it on a desk, and he just didn't know what to do at all. But he was also he was a wheel builder. That's where his name come from, for bicycles.
Oh, I saw a little clip that the Guardian posted where he talked about how he could make 200 wheels in a day.
So he in Jamaica, he had a cycle shop, and he said in Jamaica you had to do everything, and he could do everything. But here, 10 people make a bike, and he just was wheel building. Yeah, and he was very, very good. He worked for a few companies and ending up at a company in Penge called Holdsworth. So that was his sort of main job. But he was also a Pentecostal preacher, and
wow.
Yeah, he said eventually, well, when you're with God, God will help you. So he took his camera to the church, and I think someone told him how to use it. I think that's how it worked in the end. And he's been apparently filming ever since. And he, as part of the event, they also showed a film about him by a photographer called Sandy Hudson Francis, and it was shot in his house, and they're just video players and cameras and tapes and CDs everywhere. So he must have so much, and I don't think that much is digitized.
So can I just ask, so he lives in Brixton, he still lives in Brixton, and did he take still photographs as well, or is it just video or film, sorry?
I don't think still photographs, and isn't
that interesting?
Yeah, and it was never in the event. It wasn't quite clear why he started doing it. I think in the Guardian it says he did it to show his family back home. What it was?
Oh yes,
yeah,
yes, because it said that he did audio tapes, but that didn't quite work, so he started doing little films.
Yeah, his daughter was at the event as well, and she said something like it was almost like a diary. He would film every day. And so what they did, they showed 4 of his films, and one was quite long, it was 20 minutes, and the other ones were quite short, and they're all called Somerleyton, which is because a lot of them were shot in Somerleyton Road. And this is where the church was, the Pentecostal church. I think that's why the films are called that. They're not just shot in Somerleyton Road, actually. It reminded me quite a bit of Jonas Meekers at some point.
In what way?
Well, because there's not really a narrative in a way. It's sort of, film footage cut together with someone talking over it. So he always, I think in all the films, he talks over them, but again, not necessarily in a sort of orderly way, like you would in a BBC documentary. It's more like, oh, look, there are all these people. Oh, this one obviously can't make up his mind because it's someone who's about to go into Brixton Market, and then they turn around, and then they turn around again. And so he sort of partly comments on what you actually see.
I love that.
Yeah, and partly sort of says other things. The longer film,
so it's like he's just talking to you.
Yeah, and he is that is one thing. He does actually talk to someone. You really feel he's not, again, it's not like a documentary. I don't think he says you. Maybe he does sometimes say you can see, or something. I think he might have said that sometimes, because I can't remember now why I got the distinct. I actually wrote that down. Oh, he's talking to someone.
Right.
So he obviously does it with someone in mind. I guess if they've been done for the family, maybe
Yes,
that's where
yes.
that comes
And I
from.
really like that idea because it's not like that kind of voice of God narration.
Mm,
And it doesn't sound like he's trying to kind of be a journalist
no.
in the way he's doing it. He's being himself, reacting to what he sees and commenting. That's really interesting.
Yeah. There is one film which is probably the most well known, which he's done. I think from what I saw, it looked sort of after the Brixton uprising,
Mm,
and he has a small microphone, and you can see sort of his hand holding the microphone to people, and he's asking them things.
right.
He says, "Why did this happen?" to various people. So, but that's quite different, that film, in that respect, that he asks people.
Mm.
Otherwise, I mean, the long one that they showed at the beginning is really interesting. It took me a while to figure out what was going on, but they had built this church called Jesus Saves, and they didn't know enough about planning permissions and things like that, so they were asked to pull it down. So what you
Oh
see is
no.
just the front of the church still there, which is like a archetypal house shape. But you're on the other side, you're not on the
Mm.
outside, you're the inside, but the rest of the church basically is gone. And there are all these there are a lot of people, like men and women and children, actually dismantling the last bits of it. So there's still quite a bit of floor to be dismantled. So they go round, and it seems to be at least autumn, if not winter. It's cold, and everyone, is wearing. It's from 1970, I think. Everyone is wearing short coats with little fur collars and boots. The women, and the men, quite a few wearing overalls, and they're just
Yes.
they're just going around. And there's quite a lot of this footage, but then there's also footage of inside the church, and I suspect it's the same church but earlier, when it was standing. I didn't quite understand, or whether it was when it
Yes.
then went to a new one. And that is quite different, in terms of that there's sort of church music underneath, sort of the organ the whole time, but he's also talking, and he's
Oh.
talking about that there's no place for Christ in Brixton at some point, I think he says. And so that is a lot about, this particular, that is a bit different, I think, than the other films.
And it sounds really fascinating in terms of kind of bureaucracy versus, I don't know, intent
Mm.
or the desire and the passion to build this church. But it also sounds like the women are quite dressed up, or like they're wearing
Yeah, I know.
to be doing that. Because if the men are some of the men are in overalls, but they're in little coats with fur trim, that sounds really quite
That's
smart.
actually true. I sort of just accepted it, but yeah, they are not dressed for this kind of work. They're just dressed for going out.
Well, do you think they're dressed to go to
I
church?
don't think
I
so.
suppose not
No,
quite as dressed up as
because when
that.
when you see the
Just
congregation in church, yeah, that is more dressed up. And in the film with Sandy Hudson Francis, he also that's one thing he remarks upon. He said people used to dress much different when they went to church, and he thought, I'm not sure he thought that was better. He says now they're dressing like they're going to a party.
oh, that's interesting. So what do you think he meant?
Maybe it was before more formal. Maybe,
I
yeah.
see. So kind of formal and sedate rather than just party spectacle.
Yeah, maybe it's a bit more flamboyant now.
Mm, that's very interesting
Yeah,
distinction
yeah.
there.
And it was interesting to see the church congregation. There were a lot of crocheted berets,
Very
in all
good.
different colors. Quite a lot of scarves, women wearing scarves.
Mm,
And yeah,
like silk
hmm
scarves or woolly
yeah, silk
scarves.
scarves over their heads, like you
Ah,
used
very
to
good.
do. And yeah, I guess it's just at the point where you still wear head coverings quite a bit, and the men were wearing,
Mm,
not just in church, the men were also wearing hats. And yeah, he had at the event, he had a leather pork pie hat.
very
Yeah, very
good.
good.
And are all the films in color?
Yes, they're all in color, and I think what we were shown. So the event, there were a few people there. So there was Mark Seeley, who's the director of photograph, and someone called Lucy Davis, who runs 198 Gallery.
Oh yes,
And then the artist Sandy Hudson Francis, who made the film, and
such an interesting range of
yes,
people.
definitely. And so Lucy Davis at 198, she was very much behind, I think, this first digitization. And I think they now have money to digitize more. And I thought it was really interesting what she said about that she thought it was good that the archive will remain in Brixton. And I mean, for me, working at a larger institution, it was a bit sad what she said, but I can see why, because she said, it's better, people will have better access to it than if it goes to one of the large institutions, and
Oh
I
wow.
felt bad that she feels that way, but on the other hand, I can understand that. And I thought that was, I don't know, I just thought about that a lot since that, having archives more where they have been created.
It's interesting. I mean, what do you feel about that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's this is related. There was another point when his suitcase came up that he came over with, and he still had it. And as part of the film about him, he brings it out, and he washes it off a little bit, and he takes the dust off. And I kept thinking this would be such an amazing thing to have in the museum.
Yes,
But then I
yes,
also thought,
yes.
well, he's obviously, hanging on to it, and it should maybe not go to the museum. It should go somewhere else. And so I don't know. I think I never really mind actually to be where things are, as long as they are somewhere, in a way.
Yes,
And I
yes.
can see why people say, it's maybe a bit more difficult to get to things. That's maybe the thing we need to change, that it's less.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think traditionally in old school histories, you thought, or one was led to believe that it was better if they were at a big institution because then everybody can get to a central
True.
big institution. But then by recognizing that a central institution is problematic in and of itself, I suppose you also decentralize where things
Yeah.
are, and you kind of make people come to. I mean, I think Brixton, obviously it's super easy to get to Brixton from central London, so it's still, if people were coming to London to do research on something relating to him, it would be easy. But also I think, because there's the Black Cultural Archives here
Yes.
and there's 198, I mean, I would hope people would see it as a hub for coming to study Black British
Yeah.
histories. So that's really good. And it's interesting though, isn't it? And it's, as you say, because you're at the Museum of London, it's like, it's immediately, you think these should all be at the Museum of London, they should all be here, everything should be here, but everything can't
No.
all be in one place. So, and I think it also, something that I've really felt sometimes when I've been doing research and just been going to big institutions, is that I've thought, I want to go where this material is from because I don't really understand that place. And obviously you're not going back in time to the 1970s or 80s when he was making the films, but I think coming to Brixton, you have more of a context for it than going to central London or East London.
That's true, actually. And I think particularly, maybe it is also particularly pertinent to his work because it's so much about place, and it's all,
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, it's just there seems to be loads and loads of footage, and it was just that what was shown yesterday was shot on the streets. There was a long film, so there was this one with the church, which is about 20 minutes. But then there is also one which is just mainly, it's almost like a tour of Brixton.
Oh, that sounds great. I'd love to
Yeah,
see
so
that.
he is going, that's where that happens with the man who doesn't know whether he wants to go in the market or out. And yeah, so there's a lot about market and what is being sold there, and then sort of street life as well. And yeah, he goes past the cash and carry, and a woman is sweeping the street, and children are hopping along. So it's a sort of tour, and which
Yes.
he comments on. And I used to live there, so I know it reasonably well, and it makes a
Yes.
difference, knowing the
Yes.
streets and seeing it. So in that respect, it makes even more sense to go there, to see it there.
Yes. And if you've already gone there to go to the archive,
Mm,
maybe you'd then be more inclined, or it's easier to then see at least some of the places that he
yeah.
filmed. And do you think, like, with the market, because I've seen like little Pathé news clips of Brixton Market, which I always find
Mm,
fascinating, from the 50s. And I always obviously really love seeing the clothes
mm,
of the shoppers and stallholders, but also I remember there's one, I think, from the 50s where they've got can skirts, which are like frilly net
mm,
things, petticoats they almost look like. And I just really remember that, and I loved it that there was a stall and they specialized in
yeah.
can skirts. But it just made me wonder about, do you think his films are useful and not useful, interesting from a fashion dress history perspective?
Yeah, there definitely are. I find it hard to tell you much now because it was just so fleeting. They
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely. I just remember sort of certain things. Like there was a, it sort of might sound weird. There was a lot of white. That was partly because the choir in the church were all wearing white, but
Yes.
also the woman that you then later see sweeping the street is wearing white, and it still seems to be winter or autumn or something, and it just, that's something that caught my eye. And then there's one very very short segment where a group of men stand in sort of mostly greyish suits with hats, and they just look really
Mm.
sharp, and really
Wow.
really great suits. And so that there is quite a lot of I'd love to see them really in slow motion. I watch them again and again and again.
Yes.
I think there's a
Yes.
lot you would see. And yeah, it's so nice. Yeah, and again, it's so nice that it's sort of everyday dress and just people on the streets. So I
Yes.
really look forward to more, being digitized and being made accessible.
Well, exactly.
Apparently, he used all sorts of different film formats, so that's going to be a challenge.
Oh,
And
that
video.
sounds good as
Mm.
well. I mean, he sounds like such an amazing, fascinating man, like someone who has such sort of varied skills, but also like, so he seems like he's really curious, which is such a lovely thing to be.
Yeah,
Like he's just wanting to see things and understand them through his films, but also to then share them with other people. Whether it's just like his family or whoever, but that he's wanting to show people literally what he is seeing.
yeah, that's definitely true. Curious and also very open. And he
Mm,
he did talk
mm,
about how that life was hard here,
mm.
uh, and I guess that's sort of part of the sharing as well, is to show.
Yes.
I thought that was another thing that really stayed with me. Sort of Mark Seeley said that maybe it's not wasn't intended as a form of activism, but it is. And I
Yes.
thought that
Yes.
was really.
That's really good.
Mm,
Because that's like, I always really like what Carol Tulloch says about this idea of quiet activism, that there's like different ways that you can be an activist, and sometimes it's simply by being
mm,
a particular way in resistance to the stereotypes or the vision that the white gaze is trying to impose on you.
mm,
And yes, I can see that it's like he's making the vision his and the story of that place
mm,
his, and his, the people around him.
mm. I think,
It's so
yeah, and I
interesting.
think you also got. He's obviously very proud of his wheel making. I you don't
Yes.
you didn't get the I don't think from anything I've seen I got the impression that he really know. I don't know. He doesn't seem to think that's such a big deal what he's done with the films. Also yesterday he said, Lucy Davis, he said, oh, he doesn't do anything. She does everything.
Ah.
And so, yeah, I thought that was interesting too.
No, I was going to ask you that, like how he's responded to people's interest in his archive. I mean, how did they get, like, what was it? How did they find out about him?
I think it was generally well known, and I do actually.
Mm.
I talked to Joachim about it, and we both remember seeing, because there's a lot of bikes outside this house, and we both it's further up
Right.
Railton Road from where we used to live, and we both
Yeah.
remember seeing it, and I think he was just he lived in Brixton since 54, so he's just
Mm,
well
mm.
known, and I think he sometimes works outside of the house, and that's the impression you got from the film.
Yeah.
So I think people just knew that he had that actually,
Yes.
but I don't know, you're right, I don't know, that wasn't mentioned.
No, I just wondered
Mm,
because it's so extraordinary, and I think it's also interesting in Brixton because I think it is the only place I've lived in London where I do know all my neighbours, I do know the shopkeepers, I do know. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? It's like you do, like people sit outside their houses in the summer or talk to people. And I don't, obviously it's not a sort of utopia. I don't want to give that impression, but
mm,
I think there's much more here than anywhere else in London I've lived of just knowing about people and of people having lived here all
yeah,
their lives and spending all their life in Brixton, like not really, like occasionally going into the West End, but it's an actual place where you just live.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? Which I think lots of places in London aren't. People live there and they just then go into work
mm,
and they don't really hang out in their area.
that's true.
So I think there are like local legendary
Mm,
people, who everybody knows that person and everybody talks to that person and that person knows everyone. So then you hear about other people from them. So, and I really think that's a brilliant thing
yeah,
about it
mm,
here. So he seems like part of that kind of network of people who've been here forever,
mm,
it seems, and who are doing something extraordinary, but they've always done it, so they don't realize they're extraordinary.
yeah. And I think, and again, that's reminded me of John Smith, because there's somewhere on the internet there's a film of him giving a talk, and he said from when he had his first camera, he just always had his camera with him. And that's maybe
Yes,
also part of why it's not a big deal, because that's just how it is.
yes, yes. And it's both that thing that the everyday is
Mm,
extraordinary, and when you actually focus in on supposed normal, ordinary life, it's really strange and weird. But it's also that things become extraordinary because the world changes and thank goodness that we're now all, I hope, wanting to look at a range of people and a range of
mm,
sources and a range of images of the world. Because I thought it was really interesting when the little clip that I saw in that Guardian article you sent
mm,
me, where he talks about during the uprisings that he just put his camera in his
yes,
coat, like had his coat open and had it in an inside pocket, so he was filming all the time, but no one could see
yes,
he was doing it because he felt the police would take it away from him, or the people involved in the uprising would take it away from him. And I mean, it's so clever to do that, but also it's, I don't know how you become an active flaneur,
mm,
but maybe you don't, you've turned into something else. But I really like this idea of him roaming the
yeah,
streets and following the uprising. And I think, like you said, Mark Seeley said, that is definitely a form of
mm,
activism, of this compulsion to
yeah,
record and show because what's happening is important, and you know that the wrong idea of it is going to be
mm,
given by the mainstream media and by the police,
mm,
and so you're creating this document.
mm, yeah,
Because I wonder what he did with those. Like, I wonder you know, has it all been sitting in his house all this time? Did he send it to his relatives in Jamaica? Do you know what I mean? Is there like another archive in
I know.
Jamaica with his family
That's
there?
true. I mean, it did raise more question almost than it answered yesterday. Well, it was just a
Mm,
relatively short event.
yeah.
But he did mention at one point that after the uprising, some people from, I think he said from the BBC, came round and just knocked on all the houses and said, "What have you seen? Were you
Mm.
there?" And he said, "Well, I've got all the footage here." But I then don't know whether they used it at all. I don't know that.
Yeah.
And I'd love to find. You saw a bit of the footage, because when he started in this one company, it turned out he could really make that many wheels. They
Mm.
again got in the cameras, and there must be you saw a bit of that footage
Oh.
but via him filming it from a TV. It was quite grainy and everything, and it must be somewhere.
Mm.
I know that's not that important, but in the general scheme
Oh,
of
but it
things.
is. It
But
it is because it's really fascinating because it shows that he's incredibly dexterous, and like his hand-eye coordination is extraordinary to do that.
mm,
And it is like that's also there in
that's true.
filmmaking.
Mm,
I mean, it's being deployed to a completely different, purpose, but it's that sense of being. He must be so kind of quick-witted. Quick-witted isn't quite what I mean, but do you know what I mean? That hand-eye thing of
mm,
like not there being
delay.
no time lag, yeah, between him seeing and responding,
Mm,
and so he can do that with the camera as well. And he's justifiably proud of being a brilliant
yes.
wheel maker,
Yes.
bike maker. That's a
Yeah.
real accomplishment
Yeah.
and skill. And I mean the fact he was also a preacher,
Yeah.
it's like
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah.
it's such an interesting range of seemingly unrelated, but there's kind of skills and
Yeah.
talents within there that you
With the
feel.
preaching is very much, of course, the showing people, yeah, telling people
Yes,
about
yes,
something. Mm.
yes, yes. Wow, it sounds like such a good
Yeah, it really
event.
was. It really was, and I look forward to more of his work.
Yeah, no, it seems like, as you say, this is the
Yeah.
beginning of knowing about him
Mm.
and finding out
Yeah.
more. We must go to the 198 gallery
Yes. Yeah, that's a good
together.
plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you
Well,
so much for
no.
telling me about it. It's so
Yes, it
fascinating.
was. Yeah, well, I think you told me about it in the first instance, so thank you.
Well, thank me, thank you, thank
Okay.
us.
All right.
See you next
Yeah.
week then.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.